How are you, my friends? Today we are having a showdown. Who will win between the machined pen and the fountain pen? So to give these two areas, these two worlds, a fair shakedown, I'm going to be giving you my commentary on the following 5 areas: feel, looks, cost, ink, and pragmatics. Now, to a lot of you, what I'm going to say is heresy. And to others, this might be some unifying thoughts that help bridge these two worlds of pens. Now, let's get down to it. Feel.
Round 1, fight!
All right, so right off the bat, I'm going to say that feel is very subjective. So that said, these are my thoughts. Please feel free to disagree with anything in this video, and please feel free to leave those comments down below so we can get that discussion moving. So feel. What do I mean by feel? I'm not necessarily talking about the actual texture of a pen. I'm actually talking about the writing experience itself, and that goes past just the tactile sensations of the physical pen, but it also goes into the realm of the inks that are used and the nibs and all the other options that can come into play. So what I will say is that machine pens can feel pretty good, especially with some of the smoother flowing refills. The G2 is known for some nice smoothness, and it does write nicely. That said, the attributes of even a similar sized nib will write smoother with a fountain pen with its water-based ink. And that's just with, even a fine or extra fine. When you jump up in size to the even larger nibs, like this is writing more like a bold almost. It's even smoother. And then you can get different nibs, all sorts of different nibs, different grinds. This one here is a flex, for example. So there we have a flex nib. You can see some good line variation there, in addition to those awesome ink properties we'll talk about later. Here's an example of a 1.5 italic. So you can see the insane line variation. It gets you into that calligraphy style of writing too. Round 1, feel. I am giving it to the fountain pen. So that is 1 point for the fountain pen, due to just how smooth that water-based ink can be and just the extreme efficiency and flow of all the different style of nibs that you can get. It's like through the horizon. If you are into the feel of writing itself, the act of writing, then you cannot beat a fountain pen. Next round, looks.
Round 2, fight!
All right, so again, we can see that this area of looks is, again, extremely subjective, right? We've got fountain pens there. We've got some beautiful machined pens over here. All right, so in the machined world, we're talking about exotic metals, titanium, zirconium. This one over here is bronze. But we're talking about different metals. And on top of just the different metals that you could use, then you've got different coating. Here is an example of Cerakote. So you can see the exorbitance and the patterns that were hand applied here. Then you've got potential millings. So look at the depth and breadth of this milling. It runs the entire length of the pen. Each interior puzzle piece is flowing a different direction than the next one. So this is just beautiful to look at. Then you've got the metals themselves, right? Even exotic metals like zirconium Damascus, right? Let's look at this. Here's some more zirconium Damascus. That pattern is in the metal itself. These are different types, different alloys of zirconium that are forged together. So that is a really cool thing. All right, now let's talk about the fountain pen world. So the fountain pen world doesn't often deal with those metals, although there are kind of more recent examples. Here's a titanium pocket pen, the Nova. However, by and large, most of the fountain pen world looks more like this, where you've got different nice materials, right? We have, some metal and abalone here, gold-plated and abalone. Put a Yovo nib on there. Or you've got that kind of more classic look here. This is, again, a different type of resin with, some gold plating adornments there. Right, this is very classic looking. Falcon nib. Very different aesthetic than, something like this, a machine pen. And then also, you find really nice resins in the fountain pen world. Resins that have depth, that have shimmer, that change color depending on the angle and the lighting. So it's a very different aesthetic, right? This versus this. This one's a lot bigger. This one's generally a little bit smaller. Very different aesthetic, but both are beautiful, and there are things to appreciate in both of these worlds. All right, round 2 looks. We're going to give half of a point here to the fountain pen. And we are going to give half of a point to the machined pens. Again, there's different aesthetics for both, right? Anodization, millings, exotic metals over here in the machined world. And then you've got more kind of fancy resins and precious metal plating over here in the fountain pen world. Next up, cost.
Round 3, fight!
All right, so more beyond just basic cost of office supplies, things that you can get, you accidentally walk out of a bank and you've got one of their pens with you, you know what I mean? So there's all sorts of price points for the pens. Obviously, we're talking about kind of more luxury items that are built towards, heirloom pieces that have much higher quality than, these things here. So anyway, point being, you can still get a ballpoint or a fountain pen for less than $5. So cost itself isn't going to make or break the bank on any one person. Now, let's look at the details of our costs in these luxury items here. If you know what a Visconti Homo sapiens is, you know the price points that we're talking about here. This is not something that the average person off the street would ever even consider in the realm of possible, even to sell. But these things are a grail in many sorts, and they sell quite a bit. In fact, this one here looks like is limited to 292 out of 888. However, unless this is a super special edition I'm not aware of because I haven't done the full review on it, this pen should be in about the same price point as this machined pen here. So as far as cost goes, things are actually pretty equitable between the two worlds of machined pens versus fancier fountain pens. Now that said, the machine pen market, I'll say it'll go up to around $2,000 for the most exorbitant machined pen with, all the bells and whistles from one of the bigger makers like Felholter or, Nottingham or something like that, Tactile Turn. However, bigger makers in, the fountain pen realm can go for way more. Look at the Montegrappa, right? They've got Montegrappa super special models. That Frankenstein model that just came out, it was like almost 20 grand. Even though in the actual world of kind of common, quote unquote, everyday users here, they're about equitable. The fountain pens can go way more exorbitant. And with that said, I am going to go ahead and give the little edge. We're going to get 0.6 over to the machine pens, and that leaves a 0.4 for the fountain pens. So a little bit of an edge over here to the machine pens because more or less they're pretty equitable as far as price goes. However, the machine pens still don't top out near as expensive as some of the crazy expensive fountain pens. Also, the ink refills in the long run for these are going to be cheaper than when you get into actually buying all the different types of inks that you can get. On the surface, it's not that big of a deal, but when you add it all up, the fountain pens do have a higher cost there as well. Next up, ink. Check out some of those cool ink properties there.
Okay, gentlemen, we went over the rules in the dressing room, and we took
You know, if you're talking about machine pens, you're using a Parker, you might have, I don't know, 6 to 8 different colors, maybe a little bit more. If you're using a G2 refill, you might even have, 20, 25 colors. But when you get into fountain pens, you've got literally thousands of different colors. Thousands. So it is a phenomenal jump up into the fountain pen world with the vast variety of colors that you can get. Now, that said, it comes with its ups and downs. Most of these are water-based inks that helps them flow super well, and that's one of the reasons fountain pens feel so well when you write. However, it means in the long term, you're going to get potential smudging. So here's an example where I wrote something to my wife. She held it, or maybe it was me, maybe it was one of my kids. Someone held it here, and then the water oils on their hand kind of smudge some of that beautiful ink, right? So that's some of the potential downfalls of, these water-based inks. That and inky hands. I never had inky hands until I got into fountain pens. It's just kind of another downfall of, the particular inks that we're using here. Now, there are exceptions to the rule. You can get inks like this one that are permanent, that will not wash off with the oils or the water from your hands. And you can get, iron gall type inks that will not worry about pigment fading from sunlight, for example. However, again, if you go that route, you're more limited in color. And at that point, if I'm inking up one of these with an ink that could be more troublesome, such as a permanent ink or an iron gall ink, which I really wouldn't do on a pen this nice, but if I am going to be inking up, going through all the effort to do that to one of these pens, at that point, guys, I'm really just going to go and I'm going to grab one of my machine pens instead. So for all these reasons, we are going to give the edge of ink, due to all the colors, the attributes. We didn't even really talk about shimmer and sheen, things like that. That's going to the fountain pen. That leaves about 0.4 points going to the machined pen. And these 0.4, even though this side wins on color, these 0.4 points are going for those kind of quick drying inks that don't smudge in a thinner package. However, there's way more variety, color options, and color attributes with fountain pens. So fountain pens edges out machine pens for ink. That leaves us with our final round, Pragmatics.
Final round. Fight!
So, pragmatics, if you aren't aware of that term, basically comes down to how functional is it in everyday conditions? How useful is it in your actual day-to-day life? And there is a big difference between fountain pens and machine pens in this regard. So I would say 90% of fountain pens are two-handed endeavors because they're capped. So that means that you need two hands to go ahead and activate and get that pen engaged and ready to write. And that final 10%, right, you do have one-handed options in the fountain pen world. And actually, this is an example of an EDC fountain pen that I do carry because it is one-handed. However, for the vast majority of the fountain pen world, you're talking a two-handed endeavor with a cap that you may or may not even be able to post too. So that's another thing where you might have an extra thing you've got to hold on to or place somewhere while you're writing. Now, this is in contrast to, I think, every single machine pen I own is a one-handed operation, right? You've got a bolt, you've got a click, you've got a cam, you've got some operational method up here, but it's all one-handed. Now let's go into those inks we were talking about. Machine pens use the ballpoint refills. It could be a gel, which is a little bit more smooth, might take an extra second or two to dry. However, compared to, water-based inks in a fountain pen that might take up to 10 or 15, maybe even longer seconds to dry, the ease of use of this ink is way above that of the fountain pen. So again, in a pragmatic world where I am writing a note down for someone in the office and they might carry with their thumb, you know what I mean? And I don't want them to smudge it with their thumb oils. I want that to dry fast. Then this is the way to go. Also, one thing I've noticed between the worlds is the machine pens are much smaller, right? They've got closer of a diameter, anywhere from, I'll say like 9 up to 12-ish millimeters, versus a lot of fountain pens can get much girthier, right? Up to, 15 millimeters or so. I will say the weights are about the same because these are thinner but metal, but titanium's a light metal. So, this being girthier, but resin is a lighter material, even though it's girthier. The weights are about comparable. It's really just the size that makes the machine pens that much more pragmatic. And for all these reasons, I'm going to go ahead and give the Pragmatics over to the machined pen. All right, let's add them up. Both of these worlds have something unique and something I admire. It really comes down to the environment I'm going to be writing in, okay? If I am going into work, if I am going to be passing a quick note that I need a quick one-handed operation, I jot something down, it's going to be nice and pretty smudge-proof instantly, it's going to be waterproof, I'm going to grab a machine pen. If I'm going out for a date, these tend to be a little bit thinner, and this one is going to be a little bit more svelte in the pocket, and, it's got those attributes of the ink being faster drying to boot. So if I'm going out for a date, if I'm going in the office, chances are I'm going to grab a machined pen. Now, if I'm going to sit down and I'm going to dedicate some time to the art and hobby of writing itself, I am grabbing a fountain pen. These things are so smooth to write with. The thousands of inks that you can get to contrast with one another and highlight your own personal tastes are out of this world. It's fantastic. And there's nothing like getting a handwritten letter or making a handwritten letter. And if I'm actually going to take the time to sit down and enjoy that writing, I'm going to grab a fountain pen for all of the reasons we've talked about. All right, guys, there we are. Take it as you will. There was no clear winner between these two worlds of the fountain pen and the machine pen. It really comes down to what you are looking for in the environment that you're going to be using it in. If you're going to be using it in an EDC, everyday office environment, the machine pens are the winner because they typically come in a little bit smaller, they're one-handed to operate, and the inks that they use, the cartridges, the G2, the Parkers, whatever you're using, typically it's going to be waterproof ink, right? It writes smoothly enough, it dries fast, and it's not going to smudge. Now, if you're actually sitting down for the pleasure of writing, that's a different story indeed. I'm going to go fountain pen all the way. That goes for all those reasons we talked about. The inks itself are water-based, so they flow more smoothly. There's thousands of choices as opposed to 10s or 20. The variety of nibs that you can get runs the gamut. You can get broads up even into like flexes or italic type calligraphy grinds. The amount and differential components into your ability and variables of writing is way bigger with a fountain pen. I think the thing that's so peculiar to me is that these worlds are so different and there's little overlap in a lot of the customers. I'm kind of unique in having one foot in each world equally. Most people in the pen hobby are both feet over here or both feet over there, and I don't understand the divide, and that's why I want this to be kind of a discussion to bridge these worlds, right? So you're talking about old school, you're talking about history, you're talking about, resins, kind of pretty materials and the feel of writing, fountain pens. But if you're talking about everyday pragmatics, right, like nice exotic metals, titanium, zirconium, Damascus, things like that, you're talking machine pens. And both of these are to me, they're like flip sides of the same coin. If I'm, like I said, if I'm just grabbing something to write down a note at work or something, I'm going to have a fancy machine pen. If I'm actually sitting down to write something to someone, I'm going to grab a fancy fountain pen over here. But I really don't understand why there's such a divide between these two worlds. I think it's, materials, right? You've got some metals over here, right? This is gold plated. This one is, I think all of the vanishing points are brass body, I want to say. There are metal underneath that are, topped in this case, a ruchi, but more of the time, like this one's white gold rhodium type thing. So there are metals in, the fountain pen world. And again, you can get like exceptions, right? Here's a titanium fountain pen, for example, but that's the exception. So by and large, these are the type of aesthetics over here versus more metals over in the machine fountain pen world. But I want to bring us together, guys, because we are all using writing implements. There's no need for people who have this collection to kind of snub their nose at people with a collection like this. And there's no need for people with a collection like this to go over and snub those people because, you know, you can get a Montegrappa for 20 grand. So, I mean, it is exorbitant. It is outrageous. But, you know, we're all using pens and we're all in this together, guys. And that's what it's about. So, if you like this video, please leave a comment or a thumbs up. Please do subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. And let me know your thoughts, all right? What do you prefer? Are you more in the machined world? Are you more in the fountain pen world? Why? Do you disagree with any of these crazy thoughts that I've had so far? You know, I want to hear about it down below. So thank you again for sticking with us and hanging out and talking about pens. And as always, may your journey lead to serenity.